Have you ever wondered what it would be like if Edmond Dantes from Count of Monte Cristo knew magic?
This is the answer!
Nice.
Have you ever wanted to immerse yourself in a world where fruits have magic healing properties? Do you like classic, satisfying, yet difficult turn-based JRPG action? Have you ever wondered what a samurai, a cowboy, a doctor, a nerd, a detective, a thief who has no right to be as hot as she is, a dancer, and an annoying child would do against an evil god who has managed to single-handedly kill a total of 7 other gods and has lain dormant for thousands of years? Buddy. Then boy, have I a game for you. Tales of Arise! Octopath Traveler 2. How does this game even exist? It's probably no secret that I am a huge fan of Final Fantasy, particularly of 6, which is actually my all-time favorite game. There's just something so satisfying to me about the classic TBJRPG, that's turn-based Japanese role-playing game, gameplay. Apparently, however, not a lot of other people think so, and the TBJRPG genre has all but died with the failure of Final Fantasy XIII DLC Lightning's Return. If you want the short story, there just wasn't enough of a market for it. Square Enix has since transitioned mainline titles in the series into the ARPG category, going after more projects like Final Fantasy XV and XVI, which are action RPGs instead of the turn-based RPGs of, you know, Final Fantasy VI and VII. But by all accounts, it seemed that games like Final Fantasy IV, V, and VI were a lost cause, a breed of game long forgotten for more marketable titles. However, a small runaway success in 2018 by the name of Octopath Traveler was covertly published by Square Enix, a tribute to the older Final Fantasy games in all their turn-based glory. The game sold very well for such a relatively obscure genre and came sporting a graphical look that came to be dubbed HD 2D, reminiscent of the old pixelated TBJRPGs like Chrono Trigger and Final Fantasy. It was a bit of an anomaly, to be fair, but it was a tribute to the glorious tradition of nostalgic games that no longer really held a market. And then, the unexpected happened. Square Enix shipped a sequel.
What's the procedure?
I'd like to say that the angels were singing and blowing their trumpets at such an occasion, but unfortunately this was not the case. Octopath Traveler 2 got a little more coverage than its predecessor, but for the most part the game flew under the radar. For the most part, that is. But, I kid you not, by the grace of Aelfric the Flamebringer, an ad appeared on the side of my screen while I was searching the web the day before the game came out. I bought the game the next day, booted it up, and started playing. And a few hours later, I had found the most fun that could be had since my childhood days of Final Fantasy VI. Now granted, as the title implies, I'm a bit of a shill for Final Fantasy, but that doesn't stop the fact that Octopath Traveler 2 is a modern masterpiece. I've been meaning to review this game on the channel for a long time, but I knew it'd be a larger project, so I worked on other videos in the meantime. However, I knew that I could review this game the second I launched it on Steam for the first time, and by the time I'd finished it, I wouldn't settle for anything less. So join me as we leap headfirst into the world of Celestia, where cowboys, samurai, and Catholics exist simultaneously, a place to join 7 other travelers in their quest to save the world. Hi, I'm Van Golta, a hopeless Final Fantasy shill, and this is why Octopath Traveler 2 is worth simping over. Before we begin, I would just like to say that if you enjoy the video, a like and a comment really help the channel out. And if you feel like moseying over to the subscribe button and smacking it as hard as you can, that is a simple and free way to support the channel. And don't forget to turn on notifications so that you don't miss another shill video like this one, or any of my other content. I make videos that I want to make, and occasionally that includes something you want to watch. Yes, that's a thing now. But with that out of the way, we begin the journey. So, what even is this game? You know what? I'm glad you asked. Not too many are familiar with the older Final Fantasy titles or with the TBJRPG genre in general, so allow me to fill you in. A TBJRPG is a role-playing video game where you control a party of characters, usually 3 to 5, in an open world with instance combat in the form of encounters, consisting of turn-based strategy and vertical progression. A premier example of a TBJRPG is Final Fantasy VII, widely considered to be one of the best games of all time, which, by the way, has a national holiday in Japan. It's January 31st. And no, I'm not kidding. Final Fantasy VII Day is January 31st. Look it up. I guess you learn something new every day, don't you? But that was all a while ago and has since been remade to appeal to fans of more action-based RPGs. Octopath Traveler 2 is, by all accounts, a game that would have been made over 2.5 decades ago. But here I am, making a video about the sequel to an acclaimed TBJRPG in 2023. I guess miracles really do happen, don't they? I'd be lying harder than a rug if I saw myself doing this, but then again, I don't have great foresight, so whatever. The so-called gimmick of Octopath Traveler games is that you control 8 different heroes: a warrior, a merchant, an apothecary, a scholar, a cleric, a thief, a dancer, and a hunter. Effectively, this game gives you 8 different stories to play through, each starring one of the Octopath Travelers, hence the name. The real appeal of this game is that it's like a buffet. With 8 different stories, each taking around 6 to 10 hours to complete, you can get a lot of control of how you play and when. Do you like Western-esque stories starring plucky underdogs and wealthy business tycoons? Try playing Partitio's story. Do you like a tantalizing revenge story about a tormented scholar who's framed for crimes he didn't commit? Try playing through Oswald's story. Do you like a Disney princess story about a dancer who won't give up until she's made the world a happier place? Try playing Agnia's story. Of course, the whole point of the game is to play through everyone's story, but there's at least one character who will really stand out to you. So perhaps by this point, you're intrigued. Perhaps like most of the gaming community out there, you have no patience for turn-based RPGs. Shooter fans? But if I piqued your interest at all, let's dive deeper into the world of Octopath Traveler. The cast of characters in the world of Octopath Traveler is ultimately what makes it work as well as it does. There are 8 protagonists to choose from. Hikari, a warrior from the kingdom of Ku. Partitio, a plucky merchant who will stop at nothing to make the world a better place. Casti, a doctor who's lost her memories. Oswald, a scholar in magic arts wrongly convicted of murdering his wife and child. Temenos, a cleric determined to find out the truth involving a string of murders. Throne, a thief who seeks freedom from an underground criminal organization called the Black Snakes. And Agnia, a small-town dancer following in her mother's footsteps to inspire the discouraged people of Celestia, whatever the cost. Then there's Chet, who's basically a walking anime cliche and a Disney princess rolled into one.
My heart tells me to save that girl.
What you just said is one of the most insanely idiotic things I have ever heard.
Upon first starting the game, you will be prompted to choose one of these characters as your main protagonist. This has 2 effects on your playthrough. 1, you won't be able to remove that character from your party until you've completed their main storyline, and 2, the story will more or less treat that character as the main character throughout the overarching plot, which I'll get into later. I picked Hikari as my starting character, but with the power of Captain Hindsight, I recommend Temenos. He's a strong healer that can do DPS in a pinch, and his story is among the best in the game. In addition, his personal story sets up the overarching plot once you've finished all the main stories and crossed paths. But if you don't feel like Temenos, I'm going to summarize each character's appeal and story so you can decide for yourself who you want to play as your protagonist. Some very minor spoilers follow.
Hikari the warrior.
Hikari is the Prince of Clan Ku, a western kingdom on the continent of Celestia. He's also a skilled warrior and a friend of the people, valuing his friends and allies above all else. Without spoiling any of his story, I can say that his plot is essentially an anime character arc that involves him getting more and more powerful until he's finally able to overcome his enemies. Despite the description, it's anything but boring. Hikari's no Boy Scout, but you can count on him to stand up for what's right, even in the face of his own darker temptations. His story is like pizza. It's a crowd-pleasing, satisfying, and fun, ultimately simple adventure that conveys a message about the power of friendship. Speaking of pizza, bon appetit. As far as mechanics are concerned, Hikari is one of the best units in the game. He has starting access to the warrior job, which has excellent tanking and DPS abilities. If you like samurai, pagodas, and inner demons, Hikari is definitely the one to pick as your starting character.
Partitio the merchant.
Partitio is a young lad who moved out west with his father into the silver mining country, along with his father's business partner, who planned to build a town on top of their newfound prosperity. In 20 years, Pap Yellowwill, Partitio's dad, and Mr. Rock, the business partner, built the town of Orzrush, and from there, Partitio's story follows him on an ambitious quest to end world poverty. He's plucky and kind, and his voice actor is actually pretty great, lending a western air to the character. Partitio's story is one of a hard-working underdog determined to change the world for the better, even when he's laughed at and ridiculed. I'm actually going to go more in-depth into Partitio's story in another video because I think it's just that good, but I can understand if he doesn't appeal to everyone. It's okay if you don't like Partitio, then I respect your opinion. Stupid. In combat, he's a good tank and even better utility, plus he has some nice money-making abilities. Arrow of Fortune spam is okay DPS starting out, but once you discover secondary jobs, Warrior Partitio makes one of the best tanks in the game, if not the best. If you like cowboys and underdog stories, Partitio is your man.
Casti the apothecary.
I can't say too much about Casti's story because much of it revolves around the fact that Casti herself has amnesia. Without spoiling anything, I can say that Casti's story doesn't bring too much to the table, but her character and voice acting are great overall. I mean, when the star of a show is a doctor. It's not nearly as interesting at a glance than, say, a warrior or a thief. But her story is pretty good and manages enough twists and turns to keep the player guessing as to what will happen next. Gameplay-wise, she's a good single-target healer throughout the entire game, and her concoctability late game is possibly the best support ability. She works kind of like Chemist if we're talking Final Fantasy V jobs. If you like unfolding mysteries and weird apothecary hats, then you might want to pick Cassidy as your protagonist.
Oswald, the Scholar.
I joked earlier that Oswald is just Edmond Dantes from Count of Monte Cristo, but he knows magic, but the setup is actually eerily similar. Basically, he's accused of a crime he didn't commit, then sent to a remote high-security prison that also happens to be an island, and eventually escapes to enact his revenge against the one who put him there. I know if you're gonna steal, you should steal from the best, but damn, I didn't know you were gonna copy the homework verbatim. Look, man, it's not Alexander Dumas' fault he didn't write a fantasy novel. Still, from a writing perspective, I think that Oswald's story is the best in the game, if you don't choose him as your protagonist. The story changes based on who you choose as your hero or heroine, and I think it gets worse if you choose Oswald to start out with. Mechanically, he's a magic DPS glass cannon, and pairing him with a secondary healing job will pay off pretty well for you, I think. If you like sweet revenge, pick Oswald.
Temenos, the Cleric.
Temenos is a cleric who follows the Order of the Sacred Flame, a church of believers who follow the god Aelfric the Flamebringer. His story involves him doing detective work into a series of deaths and uncovering the true nature of the Order. Temenos' story contends for first place with Oswald's from an objective standpoint. It's a fantasy detective story that explores the conflict between ideology and reason. It's good stuff, and the character of Temenos is an intriguing one. He's laid back and witty, but occasionally a bit of insecurity will expose itself within him. Come to think of it, he's a lot like Sherlock Holmes, and Crick, his sidekick, is a lot like Watson. Yeah, I see what you're doing here, Square Enix, just ripping off classic literature. In gameplay, he's a strong healer and can do a little damage on the side. If you like detective stories, Temenos is your man.
Throne, the Thief.
Throne's story has a solid opening, but I found the resolution to be lacking. None of Octopath Traveler 2's stories are bad, but Throne's just lacks the narrative oomph that Temenos' and Oswald's have. It's a problem with setup, I'll address this later in the video, but Throne's story still has time to shine. Throne's character is a good foil to the mostly sunny personalities of the Octopath Travelers, and she has mostly believable motive and good voice acting. Her unit in combat is a bit more mid, as it usually boils down to surprise attack spam. Other than that, she doesn't really have a lot of a utility and is among the worst travelers. But I mean, she's hot. That's gotta count for something, right?
You really are a beauty. Why don't you come have some fun with us?
I don't have time to play with children.
Agnia, the Dancer.
Agnia is a dancer by trade, following in her mother's footsteps, vowing to cheer up the downtrodden world with her performances. Her story is very similar to Berticio's, but the antagonist is overall worse and her motives are less compelling. Mind you, the story is by no means bad, just less good than the other characters in my opinion. The main appeal comes from just how heartwarming it is. It's a satisfying, fun little adventure that will no doubt keep you entertained throughout. Agnia as a unit is pretty okay overall. The dancer job has always been a support class, and this one's no exception. Pairing her with a tankier job like Apothecary or a healing job like Cleric will give you a lot more utility, and late game you can switch her off to Conjurer. If you like Disney princess shows, pick Agnia. And just between us, Agnia's hotter than Throne.
Ochette, the Hunter.
Ochette is a hunter who lives in the... Wait. Is she Naruto running? No cap, Ochette is basically a walking anime cliche. Her quest is to basically capture 3 giant anime-sized monsters and bring them back in time to stop an anime-level catastrophe. Her abilities are flashy anime moves, from the in-air multi-attack arrow to the slam-dunk axe attack. She needs to follow her anime heart. If you like anime, watch Ronin Warriors. Okay, for real, I found Ochette kind of annoying, although in time she becomes easy to ignore. In battle, however, she's one of the best characters in the game, up there with Hikari. She's basically the axe and bow version of the sword and spear warrior job. Pick Ochette if you like catgirls. And anime. Okay, that just about sums up the characters. Once you made your pick, you're all good and ready to begin your travels in Celestia alongside 7 other brave souls. But, as you'll find, there's more to this game than just the individual journeys of the travelers themselves. If you're at all familiar with the turn-based combat of earlier Final Fantasy titles, then Octopath Traveler 2's gameplay should be fairly simple. In a single turn, all allies and enemies get to act once, except for bosses, each taking turns to perform attacks, healing, or items. It's pretty uncomplicated in nature, but definitely requires a bit of strategy to effectively pull off against harder opponents. You get a party of 4 characters, each of whom have a starting job that gives them their first abilities. Later in the game, you'll find secondary jobs that alter a character's in-battle sprite, as well as giving them access to a new set of abilities, which are unlocked by job points or JP. Job points are earned alongside experience, and you can selectively unlock job abilities in whatever order you choose. It's honestly not rocket science, just pure fun. It's pretty intuitive, and I don't need to explain the whole thing here for you to understand. The main gameplay loop consists of leveling up to complete character stories, then grinding to find new loot and dungeons, then taking that loot to further complete character stories until you're ready for the endgame. There is a fair bit of grinding involved, but the growth egg 2-man party trick that you learned in Final Fantasy V is applicable here too. Just take your best character, in most cases it's Hikari because you can put Arms Master on him and he does obscene amounts of damage, and the character you want to level up, stick an EXP augmenter on the ladder and farm level 45 areas until your second character is at the desired level. Don't forget that the 2x battle speed button is a thing. Aside from main stories and exploration, there are 2 other activities you might want to try: side quests and cross-path stories. Side quests, or side stories as they're known in-game, are tasks that you can perform for NPCs either out in the wild or by procuring special items. You get rewards and XP for these, but in my experience they're not too good for leveling your characters up. However, don't let that stop you from trying out a few if you're so inclined. You need to complete 2 in particular to unlock the super boss. Crossed paths, on the other hand, feature a joint adventure between 2 set Octopath travelers and give you the opportunity to see their chemistry together. This is a major improvement over Octopath 1, which was more or less an Uber for fantasy characters. Listen, it's not for everyone, but I think more people would like JRPGs if they would just give it a shot. If you like older Final Fantasies, you'll find Octopath Traveler 2's gameplay to be a breath of fresh air. This is a Square Enix game. As such, I would be disappointed if the soundtrack didn't make me piss myself in awe. And as it turned out, I had no cause for worry. This game's music is simply phenomenal. Give it a listen.
I like my odds.
My turn.
Instilled with lightning to
Here goes.
So, the time has come. Let us decide once and for all who the true star is. Come, Agnia. Let's give them a show they won't soon forget.
Here you go.
Very well. Mark your feet.
I owe you. Micah. Bow of the Hunter.
Here we go.
Sorry. That's not an OST, that's a fellow YouTuber named Bad Hairline Productions, who did some covers of Octopath Traveler 2 songs not too long ago. He also does some covers of other video game music like Final Fantasy, Chrono Trigger, and more. His covers are pretty damn great, and you should definitely check him out if you've got the time. Just thought I'd throw a recommendation out there because he's a fellow small YouTuber, and there's not a lot of Octopath Traveler 2 content on YouTube right now. So, do with that what you will. Also, this game's graphics are a sight to behold. Octopath Traveler 1's graphics were a flashy throwback novelty, but nowhere near how good the sequel looks. Granted, the game's not Elden Ring or Horizon Forbidden West, but the whole point of it is that it's not trying to be. Graphics in a video game are not necessarily about scale or detail, although those definitely add to the experience. Video game graphics are about polish, ingenuity, and originality, and Octopath Traveler 2 embodies those elements spectacularly in its graphical design. Truly, it's a beautiful experience, and not just a nostalgic one. Even though it is plenty nostalgic. Here I'm gonna get into some pretty dire spoilers, so I beg of you, if you haven't played the game, skip to the timestamp on screen now. Trust me, you do not want to spoil this game for yourself if you're even thinking about playing it. Once you complete all the main travelers' stories in the crossed paths, you will be informed that you are ready to start the extra stories. Having been acquainted with all 8 of the Octopath Travelers, you are treated to an adventure that sees them come together and behave like a greater team. The more time it takes for you to get to this point, the more satisfying it is. Anyway, it turns out that the last remaining god, the evil one who goes by the name of Vide, has plunged the world into an eternal night by snuffing out the sacred flames. Your job is to reignite all the flames while finding out the truth about those whom you once called allies. Once you do, a massive island will rise out of the sea, Vidania, stronghold of the evil god Vide. You'll go there to fight the final boss, who is none other than Vide herself. Killing her restores the dawn to Celestia and effectively ends the game.
Axe of the Lion.
The only writing critique I have for this game comes at the end. Unfortunately, that I have to do any writing critique at all. So far, the game has had a mostly spotless surface record, but it starts to fall apart a little at the end. For one, a bunch of characters who were formerly thought of as allies are revealed to be evil. Among them are Mint, Ori, and Kazan. Mint's betrayal was fine by me since we knew so little of the character anyway, but Kazan was basically confirmed to be a good guy. He was sus there for a little bit in Hikari Chapter 3, but come on! There's no way he was an evil, dark, god-worshipping cultist who serves Vide this entire time. Even more ridiculous is the betrayal of Ori. The fact that her very sincere, bubbly personality was nothing but an act was honestly pretty cheap. Apparently she works for Vide too, even though it still doesn't make a lick of sense given what we know about the character. Honestly, it's cool with me if Ori and Kazan turn out to be bad guys, but we need better setup first. Like, honestly. Hikari's story hinted at Kazan being shady, but not that he worked for Vide. Maybe if at the end of Hikari's story, Kazan would be shown stealing the Darkblood blade and saying something ominous, and then it cuts to black or something. With Ori, however, jeez, she was just this funny little scrivener. Sure, she seemed to be everywhere all the time, but that doesn't even come close to hinting that she works for a dark god. Such a betrayal just required more setup. And since I'm critiquing stuff now, I might as well throw in some sundry critiques on the characters' plot lines. The villain of Casty's story, Trousseau, was a fine idea, but it honestly needed better motive. He magically transforms from a kind doctor into an evil plague maker. His reason? The world is suffering. Fine reason, but that's not enough to convince someone in real life to commit genocide. Maybe if Trousseau was subject to repeated displays of carnage and death, if so many close to him had suffered and died, and if he was a tortured and pained soul, then it would have made more sense. But alas, this is not the case. Throne's ending felt very shoehorned in, and that's a shame because it was actually a cool idea. As it turns out, all of the Black Snakes, including Throne, are children of an immortal superhuman named Claude. Basically, he had a ton of kids in hopes that he'd eventually find a successor, which is, again, a cool idea. There are 2 total hints throughout Throne's story, but from them, I never could have guessed the actual outcome. The setup just needed to be more extensive. If you're going to pull off this bombshell reveal at the end of a story, then you have to build up to it. The other thing that's more of a nitpick for me is that Hikari's cursed blood doesn't have as much weight as it might. It's obvious that he struggles with his inner demons, but the fact that he never does anything reprehensible, or in other words, never really loses, seems like a missed opportunity for me. Again though, that's just my opinion. The absolute worst thing I could say about Octopath Traveler 2 is that it's not for everyone. When Square Enix made this game, it's obvious that it was made and marketed to a specific and somewhat niche audience. But whether or not you like TBJ RPGs, this game is a veritable modern masterpiece. Whether or not you'd enjoy it just comes down to a matter of taste. Uncultured swine. This game is a masterpiece of storytelling, gameplay, world building, music, and voice acting. Listen, good folks of Square Enix, if you're out there watching this video right now, I'm telling you on the behalf of the JRPG community that we want more of Octopath Traveler 2. Live a Live Remastered, Triangle Strategy, and Octopath Traveler 2 are all windows into the past, solid examples of gameplay that hold up just as well today as their older counterparts. Look, I'm not pretending that Octopath Traveler 2 is a perfect game, it can be improved, just like any game, but it showcases just how far the TBJRPG genre has come since Final Fantasy I. Honestly, thanks Square. It was an honor to travel with you. But just like all stories and travels come to an end, so must this video. Listen guys, this video was in the pipeline for a while. I'm so glad I was finally able to get it out, and expect more Shill reviews in the future. I hope it was as fun to watch as it was to make. If I made you laugh at all, or made you want to try out this modern masterpiece of a game, then do me a favor by hitting the like button and commenting in the comment section down below. And if you like what you see and you like to see more of what you like to see, then smash that subscribe button and turn notifications on so that you don't miss another Shill review like this one, or my regular content. Again, I make videos I want to make, and occasionally that includes something you want to watch. Make with that what you will. But I have been Van Galta, a hopeless Final Fantasy Shill, and I'll see you in the next video. Pizza.